But I think it was Teddy who did he called it the square deal.
I give a disclaimer here because even though Shane Gillis can make some dumb points, the guy's really funny.
Oh, he's funny, yeah.
He's one of my favorite comedians.
They've decided that we need to go back in time to a guy named Roosevelt. Not the bad one, the other bad one.
But I think it was Teddy who did he called it the square deal, which is kind of what we're approaching, which he broke up all the guys that were making all the money, the 1% basically.
Yeah.
He called it the square deal. Was that Teddy?
Wow.
Yeah, focused on the 3 C's: fair consumer protection, control of giant corporations, and conservation of natural resources.
So we're getting close to, we need another
Yellowstone was all him?
where somebody's willing to abuse their executive power to shut down whatever the fuck we're doing right now.
But the thing is, like, don't you think that big business and corporations and super PACs and all these different things have gotten so deeply entwined in politics that if a guy ever tried to do anything remotely like that, they'd kill him?
Yeah, we went too far.
I mean, look, we thought Trump was going to do it. It's clearly he's not going to do any of those things.
He's not going to do any of those things they said.
You know, we're going to have to get, one or two guys are going to have to get shot in the head.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do it.
Or something else is going to have to happen. Some other radical change.
They're so intertwined now. It's like you can't get past them.
There's so much dirty money.
What are we going to give up, fellas?
No.
We can't lose it.
No.
We got a good thing going.
Yeah, we got to get somebody in
it's
there.
funny
It ain't
how
killing the politicians. It's
slowly
killing the
but
people who control it.
surely people try to turn everything into some sort of a totalitarian government. They slowly want more and more power, more and more control. They want more to siphon more and more money. It's just over time. That's always what you're fighting against. Always.
But don't you feel like we're at a boiling point? It feels like something's going to happen.
Yeah, it's pitchfork era.
Something should happen
coming.
because if it doesn't happen, then we're all going to be fucked.
No one can get a home. No one can pay their bills.
They got flock
Everyone's living with
cameras
roommates at
everywhere.
35.
I feel like they're close, minus what Shane Gillis said. Like they're mentioning flock cameras and by the way, like, look, for all you Trump fans out there, you have to know, I feel like Trump took this presidency and was like, you know what? The deep state's bigger than I thought. I couldn't make any headway between 2016 and 2020, so I'm going to take this 4 years and I'm just going to enrich myself and my family.
Some of the most brazen corruption I think we've ever seen.
A lot of what they said there is like building a case for like government corruption. And so what's interesting to me, though, is the solution to that is based on what Shane Gillis was saying is like, okay, well, let's give the government more power to then break up these corporations who are just participating in the power structure of government that's actually producing or allowing the corruption for certain people. It's like the answer to that is like, well, let's give the corrupted body more power. And they won't use it for corruption, of course.
You got to ask when it comes to corruption, obviously, what are the corporations buying? They're buying power. What is the incentive structure for a business when you don't have to have a successful business by competing and creating the best product or service? You have a successful business by getting in tight with people that are in the government. Your incentive now is to find ways to use the government to restrict your competition out of business, which is what they've been doing.
We're getting close to, we need another
Yellowstone was all him?
where somebody's willing to abuse their executive power to shut down whatever the fuck we're doing right now.
We're going to go through a few things on Teddy Roosevelt. First off, like and subscribe to this page. But trust me, you guys want to be here for number 3 because that's where this whole thing's really going to heat up. It's going to be fun, okay? Now, first off, he was big on this, what's called a stewardship theory of presidential power. So he believed the president has a duty to do whatever the nation required unless it was specifically prohibited by the Constitution. Now, before that, not every president before that, okay, but your limited government people would go in the opposite direction. They would say that the Constitution needs to give that president authority before they take any affirmative actions on things. It needs to be that specific job of the president. Instead,
Like
Roosevelt
enumerated powers.
Yeah, Roosevelt said, no, I'm going to do everything that I possibly can, and we're going to see if the Constitution can catch me anywhere. In 1903, Roosevelt signed legislation creating new cabinet department responsible for commerce, labor, corporations, immigration, statistics, and other economic matters. What came from that? You get the Commerce Department, the Labor Department, the FDC, and the whole broader administrative state watching over our dear corporations, making sure they don't take advantage of any of us. The problem with that is once you've got regulators that can investigate or like approve or not approve or punish or protect companies, then businesses are going to invest in what? Buying politicians. That's what they're going to want to do. They're going to want to lobby the government for favors, no longer lobbying their customers to be their favored provider of goods. You lobby the government to try and control your competition for you. That's the best way to do it. Now we get into what's one of the wildest situations here. We're going to talk a little bit about the Interstate Commerce Commission. Now, he didn't create the Interstate Commerce Commission. They did sign the Elkins Act, named after Senator Elkins of West Virginia. The piece of legislation was championed by the Pennsylvania Railroad as a way to end the practice of rebates. Rebates were refunds to businesses which ship large quantities on the railroads. And many companies disliked it. They didn't like giving rebates to people who were shipping large quantities. Shippers would demand rebates and threaten to take their business elsewhere in the overbuilt and highly competitive American railroad network. So the railroad companies did not like that they had to compete with the other railroad companies by offering these rebates to people.
What a terrible thing.
They didn't
Free
like
market.
that shippers were shopping to different railroads, and instead they wanted to have the ICC come in and control the prices because that was going to help them, okay? Widely supported by larger railroad companies, the Elkins Act upheld the rates published by the Interstate Commerce Commission. Now, this is pretty crazy. The ICC ended up deciding whether a proposed rate was too high. It decided whether it was too low, whether different customers could receive different prices, whether a railroad could abandon an unprofitable line. You got a line you're not making money off of, you can't just not use it. You got to come to us and get approval for that. And if it's unprofitable, then we'll make sure you guys get some money, which leaves you no incentive to make sure it's profitable because we're going to give you money to back it up, but whatever. And it made the railroads unable to respond to trucking. So the government regulated railroads to control their monopoly power. The regulation made railroads less flexible, and trucks began taking freight from the railroads. Okay. Now, what do you do as a regulator in that situation? You think, well, our regulations are making it more difficult for the railroads to compete with the trucking, and so we're going to need to deregulate this industry. That's what we're going to need to do, right? To make sure that's what you want to do, is you want to make sure the railroads can compete with the trucking industry.
We got to regulate the trucking industry.
Yeah, you regulate the trucking industry. Exactly. Ding, ding, ding. You got it right. That's what you do. Okay, so an interstate trucker needed a certificate of public convenience and necessity
Certificate
in
of
order
laws?
to carry your goods on your truck across state lines. So those determined which cities a trucker could serve, which highways it could actually use, whether it could make stops along the way, what it could carry, which customers or industries it was allowed to serve, and whether it could haul anything on its return trip on the way back. Okay. So like it's economical for you to go, and if you're going to go deliver goods, to pick up more goods at that time and bring them back after that.
That makes the most sense.
And you make money on the way back too, and you have to charge a higher rate for just the one trip to cover both going there and returning with an empty truck, that kind of thing. In basic economics, Thomas Sowell talks about a carrier that was authorized to haul freight from New York to Washington, but not from Philadelphia to Baltimore, even though those cities are along the way between New York and Washington, because its certificate didn't have the authority. So it might have to drive back empty while another authorized truck carried the freight north. As recently as 1975, only about half of newly awarded certificates included return haul authority. Certificates required specific highway or gateway cities. A carrier seeking a direct Minneapolis to Dallas route was denied, even though its authorized route added 37% more mileage. It was trying to take a shorter route. I'm like, no.
Can't do that.
No.
Swift Truck does already taking care of that.
Okay. Trucks could be authorized to carry machinery, but not uncrated machinery. One certificate allowed pineapples. This is important. You could carry pineapples, but only if your load also had bananas. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why does it matter that your pineapples are carried next to bananas, probably because the pineapple and banana suppliers were working together with the government to try and make sure they could get good rates. Paint was authorized in one container size, but prohibited in another. Trucks could be prohibited from stopping in small towns located just off of their authorized highway. So then the people in the small towns would have to pay higher shipping costs because the truck that was already driving from the big town to the big town wasn't allowed to stop and deliver like this pallet of goods to this small town.
So you had to get a smaller truck to go to the distribution center, pick up a load and make deliveries.
These things, this is not what we live under right now. This was relaxed with the Motor Carrier Act of 1980, and then the Interstate Commerce Commission was eventually abolished in 1995. So we have solved those problems. There's hardly any regulations in trucking right now whatsoever. not a thing. How about trust busting? People hate monopolies. Do you like monopolies?
I don't even like the game.
You don't like the game because it reminds you of the real monopolies that you live under right now.
Yeah.
So you just can't stand the game even.
Well, it reminds me of late stage capitalism. Okay? Where one person acquires all the property.
We're going to bust up the monopolies. So the Sherman Antitrust Act is already antitrust is top on my list of least favorite things that the government does. Okay. Now you might think, well, that guy really likes monopolies. That's why we were talking about monopolies. No, that's not the case. I just don't consider every business who's got like more than 40% market share to be a monopoly, like the government decides they are sometimes.
Well, anything that I would say I dislike anything that inhibits the free market, the free choices, the voluntary choices of the market.
So you wouldn't want Amazon to come up with a way to like actually physically in the real world prevent another person from setting up an e-commerce website.
No.
You wouldn't want, like someone's filing for, they're going to try and do that, and you can go and buy goods on this website, and Amazon finds a way through whatever means they can to stop that person from doing that. Now, the thing is, we would all look at that and be like, yeah, that's exercising monopoly power if they were doing that. The problem is they can't do that unless they use the government to do it. That's the only way Amazon can do that.
Or the other way in which they can do that is that they become the best product service at the cheapest possible price.
Yeah.
Compared to all the competitors that competitors can't move in. But who wins in that scenario? The consumer. The consumer.
Well, yeah. I mean, like,
you're getting the best possible product or service at the cheapest possible price.
Before Roosevelt, we had the Sherman Act. He didn't pass it, but they would specifically look at whether or not a company was in an affirmative way exercising a monopoly power to prevent competition in an industry. After Roosevelt, they opened it up to, well, they're just too big. Not any proof. Don't show anything where they've actually exercised a monopoly power and prevented competition and harmed consumers. So like, no, they're too big. I don't like it.
It's the only metric.
I do not like that. But that's not good, because what happens when you want to merge or when you want to grow your business? Like, you've got to be in the good graces of the government as you do
we
that.
just covered this with this whole Spirit Airlines.
Yeah, that's true.
And JetBlue and the merger that was denied by the Federal Trade Commission for antitrust due to competition. And then Spirit Airlines is now bankrupt and out of business. They just sold all their data, by the way, to Google.
Oh, it would have been bad for everyone if they would have merged together.
Horrible.
That would have been terrible.
It would have been terrible for
everyone.
United Airlines and American Airlines and Delta and Southwest.
What's so crazy about when you talk about the trust busting and the monopolies, people go back to this time frame in American history, and a lot of people love to point to the railroads.
And Rockefeller.
That's like, Rockefeller, stuff like that. But I mean, you hear people bring up the railroads like a lot. And the craziest thing about that example is that they are actually a perfect example of a monopoly, because they were a government granted monopoly. They were literally a government created monopoly where a few special people, and by a few, I mean 4 special people, were granted millions of dollars in grants and land, millions of acres of land for them to build these railroads, while some other railroads didn't get any of that and had to go acquire the land privately. And they actually still tried to keep up and compete for a little bit, but the government I think 4 out of the 5 major railroads were literally like government created monopolies in their areas
that they had to break up.
So they're a really great, perfect example of the government granting monopolies to specific people. Then they make themselves look virtuous for breaking up monopolies, which then proves the need for them to have this power, and then create an entire regulatory apparatus to protect and control those monopolies, all of which make the problem worse at the end of the day. Like, don't forget.
But by the way, worse for you, the consumer.
Yes.
Because it increases the price of goods, because it increases the price of transport. And by the way, where are the railroads today?
Well, there's still railroads out there.
No, there are. Yeah. And there's still plenty of goods that travel amongst the highways.
The railways.
The railroads.
Some people call them older folks.
But could you imagine a world in which railroads were free to compete and things like that? That may still be the number one mover of freight instead of trucks, instead of semis. But now the number one mover is obviously semis. But it would have been interesting if the railroads were allowed to be a free market. Mm-hmm. Would we still see that as the dominating mover of goods? Who knows?
I mean, there was crazy stuff like going back to the ICC and what they were doing with railroads. Like the railroads would get in trouble. Let's say you've booked you're a railroad and you've booked this shipping trip, and you can carry 200 cars of freight, and you've got 190 of them filled up right now, and you're leaving tomorrow. All right. And so they would go to other people like who maybe needed some stuff shipped, and they say, hey, we're about to leave with 190 and we can carry 10 more cars on here. We'll cut you a good deal because we're going to either leave with 190 and not have the extra money, or we might as well get a little bit more money, you know? And so they would cut them a big deal on the fact that they had unused rail cars basically, and they could use those on their trip. No, that is exercising like monopoly power, man. You can't do that. You can't do that kind of thing. That's bad for you.
You have to offer everyone the same rate.
That's bad for everyone if you offer those kind of rates in those specific situations. In 1862, Congress passed the Pacific Railway Act, which authorized the construction of a transcontinental railroad. The first such railroad was completed on May 10th, 1869. By 1900, 4 additional transcontinental railroads connected the eastern states with the Pacific coast. 4 of the 5 transcontinental railroads were built with assistance from the federal government through land grants, receiving millions of acres of public lands from Congress. The railroads were assured land on which to lay the tracks and land to sell, the proceeds of which helped companies finance the construction of their railroads. So they even just gave them extra land that they could sell to then help build the railroad on the other land that they were given to build the railroad. You know, at the end of that clip, they said something about people can't afford homes and all that. I've got some other points that we got to make sure we make on that at some point in time. But the Federal Reserve is something that we might point out for that. Now, he didn't create the Federal Reserve. Okay, we know that. We know that didn't happen. We want to blame Woodrow Wilson for that and all the other evil bankers that
used the government
secretly and decided that they should be able to control the nation's money supply. It's a great idea when you think about it. You know, it's great.
By the way, this is who Tucker is. You know, he's a Hamiltonian.
Yeah. Teddy Rooseveltian.
Republican.
Yeah. But
by the way, these aren't, sure, you could call them Republican policies. They're not, I would argue, conservative policies. They're not liberty-minded policies. They're not classical liberal policies. Anything that the government does to control the free market, regulate the free market, is not conservative or liberty or volunteerism, free choice. It's all derivative of the same tyrannical structure that Joe Rogan was talking about.
It's all the state. Like at the end of the day, the Republicans and Democrats are not that different on like how they feel about power. It is the state that should manage all of these things for the rest of the people. It's not the free market. It's not people's individual decisions. It is the state that should come in, and they just disagree on what kind of person should control the state. That's what they disagree on, and they have differing visions on, what the state should do, like on cultural stuff and all that. At the end of the day, they still both want a very, very powerful state. And so during the panic of 1907, Roosevelt's Treasury Secretary deposited $37.6 million in public money into New York national banks while the administration worked closely with J.P. Morgan to stabilize the financial system. Roosevelt then signed the 1908 Aldrich-Vreeland Act, which authorized emergency currency, created the National Monetary Commission, directed the commission to design broader banking reform, and that commission's work became one of the principal foundations for the 1913 Federal Reserve Act. So as we said, he did not create the Fed, but he did create the institutional
framework
for it.
He laid the foundation.
What about some other good stuff here? The Biologics Control Act of 1902. That's the first federal law requiring pre-market approval and annual federal licensing for vaccines, serums, and antitoxins. Manufacturers were subject to federal inspections, labeling rules, and potential licensing revocation.
This is when the AMA was becoming pretty big.
And this is when the FDA got its start. Not technically.
It just wasn't called FDA at the time.
Yeah. So you get federal pre-market licensing of medical products. So now you got the FDA approval system, federal control over vaccines and any kind of biological product manufacturing. You might say, well, that's good. You want that stuff to be approved. And I do think people should check into the quality of those goods. I do. I think that there should be an agency, private, that puts their own brand label on things. You want to call it an agency because it makes people feel better. Call it the Liberty, Goodness, and Vaccine Approval Agency. I don't know what the acronym is for that, but
imagine the product that you create, a drug or whatever it may be, ends up killing all the people you serve. What business do you have after that?
It's not going to be very good.
Unless you're an evil psychopath, like that your incentive is to make sure that you create products, drugs, if we're talking in the medical sense, that are going to actually keep people alive so they can keep spending money. Otherwise you don't have a business anymore. So now my question is, at this time, was there just a roving band of scientists creating harmful products that people were injecting or taking that was leading to the death of the United States? We needed the government to step in.
It's very possible that they had some bad things happen with drugs or whatever they were taking at the time. That whole field was fairly new, like relatively new as far as humanity is concerned. So there could have been a safety reason they decided to look into that. I don't know. I don't know the history of bad drugs that were getting put out at that time, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. You can say the FDA has kept bad drugs from coming to the market. I think you could also make the argument that it's kept way more good drugs from coming to the market. And in fact, by keeping those products off the shelves has in fact killed way more people than what the other drugs would have ever killed, and would have been a much better system if we had a free market private branding label for things, where if you put your brand, your label, your approval on something and then it killed a bunch of people, you don't have a business after that. It's gone. Why would you do that? So you've got every incentive to actually do a good job putting your label of approval on things if you're in a free market, because that's the only way your label is going to become valuable and you can charge the next company and people will associate that with your brand and your label that's on the drug. The minute you put a label on something and it goes and it kills a ton of people, you've lost your market power and your ability to charge companies to put your sticker on their stuff. So it's a pretty easy solution on this stuff, honestly.
And this is one of the hard libertarian conversations where you lose a lot of people because it's hard for them to think past like, oh, what do you mean? Like people should be able to experiment. What if it kills them?
Yeah. Well, these days just go to the COVID vaccine or something, or any of the other drugs, Is that what do you trust? Is that what you trust? that they said that it's good, and so therefore it's totally fine for everyone to take? So you trust what they say? No? Okay, well then maybe that's not the ultimate source of truth for you, and that it's not actually that important and special, because they can be captured by the businesses that are trying to get their stuff approved. Obviously. The problem is, if you're in our free market branding approach, that person loses credibility with customers and can lose business to someone else's branding, someone else's stamp of approval. And this one, the FDA is the only one that gets to do this. And so when they tell you it's the law at that time, this has been approved. And if it ends up being bad, or there ends up being a bunch of negative side effects or whatever, what, they going to lose their business after that? No. Their business is funded through money taken by force through, from your paycheck. So no, it's not going to happen. They don't have the incentive. How about the pure food, back to Teddy Roosevelt and how crazy it is? Once again, don't forget the point while we go on about this for a while. Shane Gillis, Joe Rogan, whatever the other guys' names are that are on that show, have identified the problem. The problem is that there is corruption. It's hurting the little guy. It's hurting the normal person. And that we need a big, strong, iron fist of government to come in and abuse their power and take care of this problem of corporate corruption in government. Okay?
They want a brawny paper towel model. Just masculine.
Okay, I got you.
Standing on the desk in the presidency to abuse executive power to fix this mess. They thought Trump was going to do it.
They did.
But
they did think it was going to happen.
We need someone more narcissistic than him.
The Pure Food and Drug Act and Meat Inspection Act. Both of those laws in 1906. The Food and Drugs Act prohibited adulterated and fraudulently labeled products in interstate commerce. Okay. You don't want fraudulently labeled products. In fact, in the private market, you would be able to go after people for fraud, if that is, in fact, what is taking place. Okay. This has turned into more of the FDA and now the USDA. So the crazy part about this is that this is actually on the USDA's website, Turning Point for Meat Inspection. In 1905, author Upton Sinclair published a novel titled The Jungle, taking aim at the poor working conditions in a Chicago meatpacking house. However, it was the filthy conditions described in nauseating detail and the threat they posed to meat consumers that caused a public furor. Sinclair urged President Theodore Roosevelt to require federal inspectors in meatpacking houses to solve this problem. Now, the craziest part about this book, The Jungle, is that it was written by a socialist purely for the purpose of making capitalism look bad, in which he visited one meatpacking plant 3 times, once on a guided tour, once with a journalist, and once when he met with the plant's lawyer. And then he made up the rest of it. Okay.
Are you serious?
No, so this thing is actually presented as like a journalist's
investigation
into what it is like inside these meatpacking plants. And yes, it did come out later that he visited the plant 3 times. And that was enough. Now, it's not that there weren't any bad situations going on in meatpacking plants. I'm not saying it's not gross. I mean, a meatpacking plant on its own, honestly, pretty gross situation overall when you think about what they're doing in there. You know, even just describing a clean meatpacking plant, honestly, probably would gross you out if I just went through all the details of what happens in a meatpacking plant. You know,
we won't describe in bloody, gory detail on this show.
No, we're not going to do that, but it's not pretty. He described it as if it were the case with all of the facilities, all the meat processing facilities, when in fact there was no evidence of that being the case. But anyhow, we got the USDA. That's cool. We get that. Thanks a lot, Teddy Roosevelt, for that, who did not create the current rules that we live under right now, but the USDA credits him for their founding, laying the groundwork. Once again, Teddy Roosevelt laying the groundwork. Now, there's some crazy stuff if you'll give me a moment on this. When you go through inspection with meatpacking plants, Thomas Massey has talked about this a lot. It's, in fact, the case that there's like 4 companies that do around 85% of all the meat processing. And that didn't happen naturally. You might say it could be more efficient. You do this big plant, but one of the big things that happened is that there are some pretty crazy regulations. It's not that you don't want to make sure the place is clean. I would like to know that the place is clean, but there are other ways to go about doing that. So they have made it very hard for smaller meat packers to exist in this industry. This is something that Thomas Massey's been working on a lot with the Prime Act, which he did get like a pilot program put into the latest housing bill. Listen, I come from a farm family. It's like actually difficult for them to find meat processors for certain meats, and what a lot of people describe as having to drive hundreds of miles to try and go get your meat processed. And then people complain about these industries being consolidated, that there's just all these big corporations are taking over everyone.
What a great picture.
That's a good picture. So the problem here is that Roosevelt wanted to get rid of like these big corporations or control these big corporations, but everything that he did made the federal officials, the administration, super important to corporations and whether or not they were able to be profitable. So what happens when you set up that incentive structure, that the most important thing for your business to be profitable is that you get in tight with the government.
Which is another thing they mentioned in that clip.
Yeah.
They're so intertwined now.
They're so yeah.
Why?
Why would that possibly be the case?
The one word question that people just, they let go by. The why. Ask yourself, when you're sitting there on a podcast, broadcast to millions and millions, tens of millions of people, and you bring up a point, be like, they're so intertwined. Why? One of the reasons is because of the solution you're offering, which is a guy like Teddy Roosevelt, which, by the way, I think it's sexist. You don't have a woman like Teddy Roosevelt that we can...
Why wouldn't you be wanting a woman like Teddy Roosevelt to come in?
To be president? I mean,
Jeez.
God.
If anyone's going to be good at micromanaging people. Good Lord.
Create the nagging act of 2028.
I mean, if you're, Shane, I know you're listening right now, a big fan of the show. I know you are. You got to ask what asking for more government to come in and fix a problem, like what incentives it puts in. When you got the regulators that are setting prices, minimums and maximums. Okay. That's pretty crazy. You got factories that got to be inspected by these people, which has led to more consolidation in these industries, something that a lot of people don't like. You've got agencies that investigate your corporations, make sure you're doing a good job. You've got government licensing your products. You've got the government printing money, creating money, bailing out banks, rescuing different corporations
or industries.
What do you think is going to come from that? The clear incentive is for the corporations to not spend their time lobbying customers to do business with them, is to lobby the government to get favorable treatment. They set up all of the roadblocks, and then they're going to pay to get past some of those roadblocks and pay to make sure their competitors don't. You've actually, through trying to control the corporations or break up the 1%, as he called it, or something like that in that clip, you have created the entire problem that we're discussing right now. Even what Roosevelt was going after were government-created monopolies. Literally. It starts with the railroads, which were literally... I don't know how many more times you could say the word literally in a statement before someone literally took you seriously on that fact that the railroads were government-created monopolies. And that's who he's going to go after. He reads a book from a socialist, decides that it describes the entire industry, and creates a situation where like Tyson's the only company that can like pack your meat for you. I don't know if you guys understood what I said, but if you're a farmer, I got to say this again because this is wild. If you're a farmer, say I got a cow. I can sell Charlie the cow. Alive. I can sell him the cow. And then I say, well, I'll take care of taking it to the plant for you because, you obviously are not a farmer. That's why I've got the cow and you don't have the cow. Okay. So I would take care of taking it over there for you. because I got the trailer and truck and all that kind of stuff. And then you deal with the people, afterwards, because it would be far too dangerous if you decided you wanted this same cow taken to the same person and then me to come back with the packages of the cow and then give those to you afterwards. That's a very dangerous situation. You get a situation in like a place like Kentucky where you live like on the border with another state. You could sell to people 500 miles over there, but not a mile over there because the state border's right there next to you. It'd be way too dangerous to sell it to that guy right there.
In Indiana, yeah.
That's dangerous stuff right there, says the federal government. You can only go that direction. I don't know why I keep harping on the USDA stuff so much, but my God, it's awful. And
maybe because farming's in your blood.
Yeah, maybe that's
it's
part
in your
of
blood
it.
and in your bones. And look, a lot of people on the left get this right now with the Trump administration. They can point out all the corruption. This guy,
they can talk about
too
corruption,
much power. Look at all this corruption. They don't really notice, when Nancy Pelosi does it, but Trump and his family and their trades and crypto and oil trades and all of that, they get it.
Well, they get that it's a problem, but once again, their solution is going to be that we need more safeguards.
Yeah, the solution is people like AOC and Bernie, which is like, wow, we need to create laws to stop this.
More commissions, and we need committees to look into this, and that's
agencies.
That's what they want to another agency. That's what we need to make sure this doesn't happen.
We have the Inspector General, and it's so funny that they come back with all of these reports, and then nothing ever happens.
No, and they have some pretty crazy reports sometimes.
We did a episode on one not that long ago, and literally nothing happened from it.
Yeah, they'd be like, oh yeah, there's literally, here it is. There's billions of dollars in fraud every single year in these programs. And then we'll talk about it on the show. And that's it. No one ever does anything because they're all in on it. It's how they all keep their jobs.
Yeah, the Inspector General is like, oh, look, we can't account for $2 trillion from the Department of War. And the Department of War like, we lost some of that stuff. And,
next day they're like, hey, look at those planes.
The president's like, we should increase the budget. And Congress is like, sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. To fight fraud or something.
Nothing ever happens. So it doesn't matter how you could create agencies that watch agencies. And they could probably catch them in a bunch of stuff.
Someone has to watch that agency.
And it goes nowhere.
Mm-hmm. It's going to change when enough people decide it has to change. Okay, we can all talk about it all day, and it's obvious, and people in government can point it out.
Here's the easiest one for me, though. It's comical. It's sad, but it's comical, which is like the investigations into congressmen having sexual assault allegations and things against them with staffers and stuff, and they find evidence that is happening, and then their solution to that is like, we'll just create a fund to get these people to sign NDAs and take some money for it.
Well, yeah.
We can't have congressmen going to jail for sexual assault.
Problem solved. Yeah.
It's God. And then, good-hearted people, I think, like Shane Gillis, that just has a heart of gold, His solution
he probably wants the right thing.
His solution is like, let's give that apparatus more power to solve the problems that they're committing. Doesn't that just sound insane to you? How does that not sound insane?
It does. And
I get frustrated because I try to talk to people about this. I'm like, I don't understand how you can't. I don't understand how you don't understand. It makes me feel a little nauseous inside. That's where my autism creeps up on me. And I start looking like I want to make a grilled cheese.
Exactly. I don't know what that means, but I agree with you.
You haven't watched enough Shane Gillis.
No.
Clearly.
No.
So
I have not. Once enough people have decided this is a problem, it can actually change. That is true. It had to be a lot of people. But the problem is, realizing that it's a problem is not enough. You have to realize how the problem happened, what the source of the problem is, how this whole situation was created. Because if everyone just points out that there's a problem, corruption, and everyone gets upset about that, I think a lot of people upset about that. They're going to come in and they're going to do the wrong thing. They're going to do the more of the same. They're going to do more of what got us here, because that sounds like, well, that's the easiest and safest way to solve the problem, is you make sure that the government is making sure this corruption isn't happening. Of course, if you don't lead them to how this actually happened, then the problem will just get worse. And so that's what we're trying to do over here on this show. And if you think that's a worthwhile exercise, then go to joingmail.com. Join the Fed Haters Club. Go to what is it? GodHatesFeds.com. What's the website?
Join us.
Join us.
You'll find your way to us eventually. Just press 2 for a while.
I want everyone to think about this, okay? This problem is pretty serious, all right? And with every head bowed and every eye closed, I want you guys to listen to what your heart's telling you to do right now. And I know what your heart's telling you to do is to hit like and subscribe on the video that you're watching. Leave a rating and a review on the podcast to which you are listening at this moment. To share it with a friend or a family member. To join the Fed Haters Club through joingmail.com. Once you type that in and it doesn't work, then go to our website and click on the button there. Okay?
We're going to ask our greeters to come forward and pass around the subscription bucket. And if you're new here, first time, don't feel any obligation. But if you've been here a while.
But fill out a card and let us know where you're from so we can contact you.
If you've been here a while and this is your home Liberty station, then consider subscribing for the community.
All right, we got to go. We got to get out of here before we get struck by lightning.
All right,
during this episode.